Many of us have woken up to the fake money and the banking scam, fake health and the pharmaceutical scam, fake government, fake climate crisis. Never mind COVID, the list goes on. But most people have not yet found what could be the most insidious and deadly campaign ever perpetrated against humanity. I'm talking about the food conspiracy. How our food is actually being used as a weapon to destroy humanity's health, make us sick, addicted, weak, dependent, and subservient. If this is news to you, listen up, because you are missing vital information that could literally save your life. The modern world is witnessing a very real pandemic, and it's one of chronic disease. In other words, they're killing us slowly. Everyone's health is collapsing, and when they're pointed out, the causes are obvious. Yet almost nothing is being said, and even less is being done. It's up to you. Only you can take back responsibility and control. Exactly how you can do this is explained in the presentation, The Food Conspiracy, which is linked in the description. It'll reveal why and how this war is being waged against us, and show you exactly how you can take back control over your family and your health. Prepare to be surprised, shocked, and to have many of your beliefs challenged. Click the link in the description right now, watch the video, and find out what you can do today. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Ian Ferguson. First, I have a couple of announcements. The first episode of the Forbidden documentary is completed. It will soon be available on Amazon Prime and other streaming platforms, but we have a unique limited edition available for you to download right now for only $3 if you'd like to get a pre-release copy. It also helps fund future episodes, which we appreciate greatly, and it is an amazing episode. I'm really proud of it. Can't wait for the next one. It's going to be even better. So just click that link in the description or visit our website. If you are a Rokfin subscriber, you can watch it directly on Rokfin. You can now get Forbidden Knowledge News live 5 days a week on Rokfin, Rumble, and our website. The website is forbiddenknowledge.news. This is also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. It's where we feature some of your favorite podcasts. And you can always get every new episode of Forbidden Knowledge News on Rumble, Rokfin, all podcast platforms. Be sure to sign up on Rokfin, because that is where you get our premium content. You also get all the amazing premium content from every creator on Rokfin. Just go to rokfin.com/FKN+, or use the link right in the description. Today I want to welcome Ian Ferguson. After a childhood filled with mystical and psychic experiences, he had a spiritual reawakening in his 20s. He spent decades researching astrology, both Vedic and Western, alchemy, shamanism, angelic magic, secret societies, mystery schools, and more. Ian, welcome. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic, brother. Actually, this is probably the most interesting and incredible, I don't know, 10 or so months of my life. Basically, like, a lot of things really shifted for me in a super, super, super positive way starting last August. So yeah, coming up on closing out probably the best 12 months of my life here in about a month. So yeah.
That's what I love to hear, man. I love it. People thriving during this important era that we're in. It seems like there's more and more people doing that. So congratulations to everything you have going on. And I'm looking forward to this, man. You've done some deep dives into so many of our favorite topics here, from spirituality, magic, and mysticism, occult, esoteric studies, secret societies, conspiracies, and the true nature of reality. There's many different directions we could possibly go with today's discussion, but where we should probably start is I'd love to hear just more about yourself, your background, and what led you down this particular path you're on.
Wow, that could be an episode in and of itself, just because as anyone who watches my stuff knows, I love to talk and I love to tell stories. So, gosh, it's hard to say. I was really like spiritual and had like a lot of psychic and mystical things happen when I was a kid, even like interactions with either poltergeist or telekinesis at a graveyard in Texas, like in the 80s. I've had, I saw a ghost in my house when I was a kid that later we confirmed that other people had seen that same ghost. I mean, I don't know. I've always been very psychically activated, I guess you could say, except for when I turned 12, I had this thought where I was like, wait a minute, how do I know that any of this is real? And how do I know that even I'm real? How do I know that I'm not? And the way I conceived this in my little kid mind was, how do I know that there's not an astronaut who's tumbling in space, who is in a spacesuit, and he's going crazy, and he's having this whole incredible vision and dream, and that I'm just a part of his dream. And I looked at my hand, and my hand got all like sort of pixelated almost, or like see-through. And there was this huge oak beam at my house that probably weighed, I don't know, 1,500 pounds or something like that, that my dad had installed fixing something in our house, converting a covered porch in the front to a living room. And it was about the most solid object I could imagine. And I used to love that beam, and I looked up at it, and even it was that same way. And then the hormones hit, and all I could think about for the next decade was girls, 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 and literally nothing else. And so I just kind of, I don't know, I had this huge drop in IQ. I think all of us men experienced that. And I wasn't thinking about the mystical at all. I was thinking about the mystical nature of the booty, right? And so then when I was in college, and I kind of went to college sort of late, I took this Religions of India class, sort of winter term 2000 to 2001. And we read the Bhagavad Gita, and I got to this passage where it said, you have Krishna and Arjuna are like on the battlefield, and the battlefield's frozen in time. And, Arjuna's driver turns and reveals that he's Shiva. And Arjuna's like, whoa. And they have this whole incredible conversation in the midst of like a frozen battlefield. And he says, I really don't want to kill my cousin, because he is about to go to war with his cousin. There was a Ternacine conflict. And he said, I don't want to kill my cousin. And Shiva says, well, you can't. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, there's men dying right now, and there's like people frozen with like an arrow through them or whatever. And he said, yes, but that would just be like shedding clothes, because your cousin's true nature is his Atman. And what he truly is, fire cannot burn it, sword cannot cut it, air cannot wither it, water cannot drown it, for the Atman is immortal, timeless, and changeless. And that is his true nature. And I read that passage, and I'm sort of paraphrasing it, and it was like I was inside a giant bell, and just my entire being vibrated. And I can really mark that that's the moment when I like sort of started to reawaken spiritually. And then a few months later, when that class was ending, I hadn't eaten for a couple, I don't know, like maybe a week during finals, and I was staying up tons, and I wasn't smoking weed, which normally I smoked a ton of weed. I was in Eugene back in the day. And the minute I got done with finals, I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to have some major bong rips. And I took 2 what are called Sobe bong. They're like mini gravity bong hits. And yeah, I smoked down 2 of those. And I was trying to play Mario Kart, and I was just bumping the wall, and my buddies were turtle shelling me and laughing at me because I was all just completely like just crushed by this weed. And then I tried to like kind of sit in the couch and just watch him. And I was like, guys, I got to go lay down. And I went in my room and I had this whole crazy vision, which actually, among other things, showed me 9/11 in symbolic form. And when 9/11 happened several months later, it took me a little while to realize this, maybe a day or two after. But I suddenly go, holy shit, that's that thing I saw. Because I saw this vision of like this map of the United States from like a satellite view, and this huge impact right where New York was, and then this wave of darkness rolling across the United States. And then when it got to the West Coast, probably because I lived on the West Coast, there was this pulse of light that stopped this dark wave. And then there was, within this blackness, there was these like deep sea creatures and like barracuda and alligators and so forth. And they were like swimming around and getting all aggressive. And then this wave got even bigger and slammed. And I now realize that second wave was the 2008 crash. And it slammed. And again, this wall of light came up and stopped it. And then those creatures in it started biting each other and fighting. And there was this huge swirling, and it was like this roiling froth. And then this wave went so high up that it was like out of the Earth's atmosphere, and it slammed again. And then the light pulsed up even stronger, and the blackness shuddered, and then it started to turn into light. And this voice said to me, and the light of humanity shall spread once more across the world. And just the entire world like lit up with light. And I believe that third wave is not a single event, but is what has been happening since 2020. And as we transition out of Kali Yuga between 2020 and 2025. And so after that experience, I had this whole series of, I went on the hippie trail and did lots of psychedelics and did all kinds of stuff. I met this literal Siberian shaman from a literal like Kamchatka, Siberia lineage. And he took me under his wing for a while and initiated me and taught me a few things. And I was only with him for a few months, but he really like worked with me a lot. And so I learned quite a bit from him. And I just kind of like went on that journey more and more. And then I kind of like went to sleep again. I don't know, for whatever reason, 2015, 2016. But before that, I'd gotten really into Advaita Vedanta or non-duality. And then in 2021, I had an ex who actually was, interestingly enough, and I wish her well, I just want nothing to do with her anymore in this life, but she was really into black magic, actually. And she was a Luciferian, really. And like Lucifer was her patron. And she's an incredible magician. Like, we didn't work as a couple, and she had a hard life. And so she's a brilliant person, and I really hope she heals someday and does well in the world. I just don't want anything to do with her. But I actually wonder now if she didn't use some sort of black magic mind control on me for me to get with her in the first place, because it's really not in my character to be around someone who's like that. But it was profoundly important, and angels have since told me that it very often happens that men are initiated by the dark feminine and that women are initiated by the dark masculine. And that this was an example of the dark feminine initiating me. And so she would teach me stuff about magic, and I would go, hey, and that would mean da-da-da-da-da-da. That would mean this, that, and the other thing is going to happen and flow from that. And she would turn to me and go, how do you know that? And I said, I don't know, I just do. And she was like, you can't know that. And I said, well, I mean, I do. And she was like, so you're initiated then? And I was like, no. And she was like, how do you know that? And I said, I don't know. I just do. And she was baffled, and it would happen all the time. And I discovered, being with her, that I also am really good at channeling. And I actually did some channeling that I kind of regret in retrospect on her behalf. For like, in particular, I would channel Lucifer all the time. And so she could communicate with him. And so I learned a lot about sort of black magic and the dark side of things, but I myself would never participate in any of the dark magic that she was involved in, and I didn't like it. And I had already done magic before that. In fact, everybody should watch it because it's iconic and legendary. But Grant Morrison, who wrote the comic book The Invisibles, and he was also one of the producers for the TV show Happy, which is very interesting, and I actually believe was a magical spell in and of itself. to expose Jeffrey Epstein, because after that show came out, Epstein was arrested shortly thereafter. And I believe that show and the character Sonny Shine was actually talking about Epstein because he did pedo blackmail, right? And he had his fingers in everything. I mean, he controlled people in the Vatican and then all over the place. And so Grant Morrison did this 1999 DisinfoCon speech where he comes up and he's like, "Whoa!" and like freaks out, and he's like, "Watch for it in the second half because I just took a tab of acid and you'll see the come up," right? And then he proceeded to talk about all sorts of crazy, awesome shit. And I guarantee your viewers would love this if they can understand his thick Scottish accent. But he talked in there about sigil magic. And this was actually before I met my ex, and I should have said this first. But he said, "Don't believe me, try it yourself." And so I immediately tried sigil magic, and I was at work gold bricking the last 10 minutes of work. And I was like, sure, I'll do a sigil. And at the time I was single and it had been a dry spell. And so I really wanted to get laid. And I did this sigil, and there was this woman I had, hooked up with a few times, and I had lost her contact info. I had looked for it a bunch, let me tell you, because dry spell, right? And she was not in any of my contact info, but I did this sigil, and all of a sudden I instantly found her contact info because she just floated in my mind about 15 minutes after I did the sigil. And so I texted her, and she was like, "Oh my God, I was just really thinking about you intensely like 15 or 20 minutes ago." And she's like, "What are you doing tonight?" And so we hooked up, and then I go, fuck, that worked. And I did a few different other things with Magick, a similar thing. I was at this rainbow gathering, and I met these two cute girls, and I did like similar, this is bad, I'm just being honest, but I did like a, sex magic type ritual. And I came out of my tent, I was up on the hill, and those two girls were walking down. They were like 75 yards below me or something. And both their heads whipped around like someone yanked their heads. And they go, Ian, and like waved me to come down. And like they both wanted to hook up with me. And I did end up hooking up with one of them. And if we hadn't gotten sick, like maybe there was more even potential there. But so I was like, man, I need to stop using magic for this petty bullshit. And so I kind of shelved magic for a while until I met this ex. And because she was into all this demonic stuff, I just didn't like it. And I wanted to push back on it. And I started doing angelic magic. And sometimes I'd mess up the ritual or whatever. The angels would veto it, because angels will veto magic that will bring disharmony into your life. It's one of the differences between angelic and demonic magic. Demons will always give you what you ask for a price, and also you pay whatever the consequences are of that magic in addition to the karmic price, whereas angels will just veto it. But I was having all this success with it, and I thought, God, I don't feel comfortable like ordering around these angelic beings of light. And so I talked to Archangel Raziel, because I started to like have really strong telepathic abilities with spirits around this time, and in part because I was channeling so much. And I said to Archangel Raziel, I said, gosh, I don't feel comfortable doing this. And he said, well, you should, because that's exactly what those angels are there for. The 72 named angels, or Shem angels, are sometimes called. He said, God created them in order that they could help and assist humans, and they assist humans who pray, or humans who do a more sophisticated form of prayer, ritual magic. And I said, okay, well, but what can I do to serve the celestial current? And he said, now you're asking the right question. And he gave me the keys to how to summon the principalities. And the principalities are the messenger angels between humans and the various different angelic spheres. The third sphere is closest to us. It's angels, archangels, principalities. The second sphere is further from us in vibration, and that's virtues, powers, and dominions. And then the first sphere, which is the furthest from us, are Opinum, Cherubim, and Seraphim. And that began a journey of moving my way up through the angelic choirs. And it started out with, they had me do all sorts of acts of charity and things to sort of test my worthiness. But about halfway through that process, it became almost entirely an internal working, to where everything I did was about integrating my own shadow, integrating my dark masculine, dark feminine, healing my trauma. Like, they helped me break a, no joke, like 28, 29 year hardcore pornography addiction that I had in part because of abuse I had when I was a kid, and I couldn't break it. I tried because it was harming relationships. It was just, I didn't like it. It was gross, but I just couldn't stop. And the angels helped me heal it. And, you know, when people often say, oh, you've channeled, blah, blah, how do you know that these aren't bad things? Well, Yeshua or Jesus said you shall know them by their fruits. And since I started working with the angels, I'm less angry. I'm more happy. I'm more generous. I'm more charitable. I help other people more. I have greater harmony in my life. I kicked this 27, 28, whatever it is, almost 30-year hardcore pornography addiction. And my entire life has just completely changed. And around last August was when I did like another huge, very lengthy 44-day seraphim ritual. And my life has completely changed since then. So I know that was an extremely long answer, but I think your listeners might find it interesting.
No, right on. You actually have a very similar path to me in some very odd ways, which we won't get into right now, but it's very interesting. Now, when it comes to your communication with angels, how did that begin, and how were you aware that you were, again, communicating with angels and nothing nefarious in the beginning before they had you do the works, as you say?
Well, see, I was actually very nervous about that because, of course, you know, at the time I was with this ex who was into really black magic. I had channeled which is what I regret, the Clephotic spirits. I even channeled, which will be relevant because I'm sure we'll get to this later. I even channeled Moloch once because Moloch would not leave me alone. And I finally, I called in angels to protect me. And I said, you can't do anything other than communicate. You can't impact my being in any way. I had the angels there, guarding me. And I did channel even Moloch once. And what came through was really horrifying, but also gave me some real insights into the ruling elite and what's going on with them. And that's why I think I have a lot of the familiarity I do with the three different, I often talk about that there's the most high faction or level of consciousness versus Luciferian consciousness or faction versus Molochian faction or consciousness. And so I was very nervous that, wow, gosh, what if I am channeling dark spirits? And I just took a leap of faith and I looked to see what was happening. And I did have it happen one time where a trickster spirit popped in because I sort of made a mistake and tried to appear as the Virtues choir. And then I suddenly felt something was off. I felt slightly unsettled and I called in Archangel Michael, and Archangel Michael is one of my patrons. And he said, oh, yep, you've made a mistake. That's a trickster spirit. And so I went back and did the ritual properly. And then the Virtues came in and they just felt very different. In my experience, angels feel very uplifting. If you're at a lower stage of consciousness, they can produce a feeling of awe that is akin to not dread, but just you're aware that they're this gigantic power and that you're this bug by comparison almost. In particular, one time, and I shouldn't have done this because I wasn't ready and my vibration was too low, I channeled the Ophanim, right? Those are the wheels within wheels with eyes on the edge. And they're a very interesting and specific class of angels. And they as they were coming through me, I could only shout what they were saying. Like I said, at the top of my voice. And it felt like I had this huge amount of voltage going through my body. And I actually felt like someone was almost tasering me and I couldn't sleep. I channeled them very late at night, 11:30, midnight, something like that. I couldn't get to sleep for another 7 or 8 hours after I channeled them because I was just Argh. And when their presence came, because my vibration was low, I didn't feel dread, but I did feel that, be not afraid feeling of holy shit, these things are ultra powerful and just feeling unworthy kind of, I guess. And so, I had to just work with them, and they kept asking me to do acts of charity. They kept asking me to help people. They kept asking me to refine my character. They kept asking me to take responsibility. to stop sinning, not in the sense of like the Christian sins, because by the way, the angels have a radically different, ideology than the Abrahamic faith. Like a lot of people think the angels are Christian or they're Muslim or maybe they're Jewish, but actually, like Archangel Michael is mentioned in Sumerian texts, they've existed long before the Kali Yuga and will exist long after it, right? And they basically existed since the beginning of sentient life on this planet, and so their morality is quite a bit different from like Christian morality in certain key ways, but they were, when I was missing the mark, and that's what I mean by sinning, meaning I wasn't in alignment with my soul's destiny, they would correct me and they would correct me and they would call me out. They would call me out. Like I'd yell at my son. I feel ashamed about that, but I yell at my son because he's being difficult or whatever. And the angels would be like, you can't do that. That's lowering your vibration. You're harming your son, who you love more than anyone in the world. That's absolutely unacceptable. Or with my mother or with friends or whatever. They would ask me to call people up and to help them. And several times I caught people when they're in the midst of terrible despair and helped lift them up. And just my life started getting more organized and harmonious. I started getting more organized and healthier, especially like my emotional health and healing of trauma. And just really the proof's in the pudding. You shall know them by their works. I just became more and more harmonious and happy and peaceful as I moved higher and higher in terms of vibration, which required a tremendous amount of work, not just in the sense of the rituals, but I had to face my darkness with real honesty. And it's not like I'm enlightened now or perfect, but my character has been greatly refined in this process. And I'm just a far, far, far better, more harmonious and more effective human being than I was before I started working with them. Right. I would say to listeners to be careful, and that if you find that things are pumping up your ego, like the angels might tell you you're special, but they're going to do it in a way of you're special because you are a conduit of the most high energy, not because you yourself have it. It's because of grace. So if it's pumping up your ego, it's making you greedier, lustier, more angry, more desirous of power, wanting fame and fortune and all that stuff. And the angels may tell you these things are coming or whatever. But if you start noticing more chaos in your life, you start noticing less harmony, you start noticing that your ego is getting out of hand, you start noticing that you are just all the classic 7 deadly sins, which have a root of truth in them, even if, like I say, the angels' morality is a bit different from the sort of modern Christian morality, right? In part because it's been hijacked. But just your life will become more harmonious, peaceful, joyous, and good, and you will be a more charitable, generous, and kind human being and more compassionate of others if it's truly the angels. If your life starts getting more chaotic, you start like being told to do something that you know is wrong. If they're like, oh, no, don't worry about that. Go ahead. It's fine that you smoke a lot of weed, as opposed to them saying, hey, Ian, you smoke too much weed. You need to cut back on that or eliminate it. Yeah. Things like that. Then not that there's anything inherently wrong with weed, but if you overindulge, then it's going to have an impact. The alcohol they hate, but weed they're kind of tolerant of, just as an example, because the alcohol just lowers consciousness, period. It doesn't mean that if you drink alcohol, you're a bad person. It just means like that you're not vibrating as high a level as you could. And so I would urge extreme caution for people, especially around channeling. I'm very, very, very lucky that didn't go much, much worse for me. In particular, I advise against channeling or interacting with jinn and extraterrestrials, because jinn want to wipe us out, the red jinn. The green jinn are kind of like tricksters. They're young jinn. The blue jinn, who are the good ones because they're free-willed beings, are very unlikely to come to a summons. It's almost always a red jinn will be like, and come in there. And they want to wipe us out and take back over the earth. So they are very dangerous for that reason. They're more they're more dangerous to us than the demonic forces, because the demonic forces want to lead us astray and want to bind our free will and get energy and harvest energy from us. The jinn don't have that imperative, and so they don't mind wiping us out.
Could you explain a little bit more about the difference between what's the difference between the jinn and demonics?
Sure, yeah. So I believe this is correct. In the Quran, they mention how jinn are beings made of a smokeless fire, and that they were kind of the alpha test for free will beings on Earth, right? And I'm of course paraphrasing here, but they say it's a smokeless fire. I believe that means that the jinn are made of plasma. Angels are made of light, and angels do not have free will, with the exception of the angels. Lucifer invoked free will and fell, right? And then a bunch of other angels kind of like followed his lead because he was such a powerful being. So other than the fallen angels, angels who are still in accordance with the Most High, they have no free will. They have tremendous intelligence and they have tremendous abilities, but they all act in like almost, they're like a perfect military that just does everything in a perfect hierarchy with no disagreement, just total harmony. And they just do whatever emanates from the Most High and whatever their duties are. And they can be very intelligent. And, you know, it's not like they're automatons. They have intelligence. They just don't have free will. And I don't know whether they choose not to have free will or they just like don't, but they don't have it. Jinn were plasma-based beings. I believe plasma, smokeless fire. And they were ensouled with free will. And they lived very long, thousands and thousands of years. Over time, they apparently became very corrupted. And so one day, the Most High said, because it was during a period of time when the Most High the Most High is the creative force and Moloch's the destructive force. So anything that's created on Earth, there's a big G God, which is beyond any planetary deity, which includes Most High, Moloch, and Lucifer's interplanetary, but I'll get to that later. But there are there is like a greater creator, which is like non-dual in nature, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the creator who has the ultimate reigns of creation here on Earth, the Most High.
So this Most High wouldn't even be considered what some say as source. There is a larger source outside of what you understand as a Most High.
That's correct. The Most High is the three most important deities on Earth, and there are many, and a lot of them are very powerful. And they sort of fall under these three general broad categories, which is to say they're either Most High aligned deities, they're Luciferian aligned deities, or they're Molochian aligned deities. There's less of those, or just, sort of like positive, neutral, and negative, maybe you could say, right? And so those deities all have their own place, and it just gets kind of complicated. But sticking with the Most High, the Most High is the creator God in this realm. Moloch is the destroyer in this realm, and I wouldn't say that Lucifer's the sustainer per se, but he's sort of the agent of evolution. I think would be the best way to describe that particular aspect of the Luciferian impulse, is that it's evolutionary in nature. And so that's how I would describe the Most High, is like he's the aspect of the ultimate God that is the creator God that's specific and rules over this planet.
Would you consider these non-corporeal energies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I consider like when I say someone's Molochian or Luciferian or whatever, most people are simply vibrating at that level of consciousness, right? And that I often show this diagram of three spheres that are, it's sort of a Venn diagram. That's one of the things that I think confuses people, is how there's crossover between Lucifer and Moloch, and there's crossover weirdly between Lucifer and the Most High. Like the upper octave or vibration of Lucifer is the lower octave or vibration of the Most High. There's a kind of middle Luciferian only level, and then there's an octave. The lower octave of Lucifer is overlays with the higher octave of Moloch, which Moloch is a pretty low octave all around. But so damn, I was saying something when you asked that question.
It was about the jinn, and then we went into the
the jinn.
Yeah,
the jinn. And so so I guess they became corrupted, and the most powerful the jinn was named Iblis. And the fall of Iblis seems to me a as above so below thing that, much like Lucifer fell, Iblis fell as well. Iblis was this enlightened, super powerful jinn, and he became irate when the Most High said, I'm going to move you to a new dwelling space, and I'm going to bring humans now to Earth. I'm going to move you into like a fourth dimensional parallel world, and I'm now going to have humans because you've become corrupted. Too many of the jinn have become corrupted, and it's because you're so powerful and so long-lived. I made a mistake in the sense of, I recognize now that if I give a being as much power and as long a life as I gave you, it's very likely they'll be corrupted over time. So I'm going to now bring forward a new species, which was humans, which are made of earth, fire, water, air, and ether, rather than just this smokeless fire. There's also more balance and range to us, but we have shorter lives, and we can be just as powerful or more powerful than jinn on a magical, spiritual level, but we live shorter lives because something about that makes us more likely to not get too corrupt and have endless corruption. And so the jinn became really pissed at this, and Iblis said, no way, we're not leaving. And they entrenched. And then I guess the angels and the jinn had like a 10,000-year war, and eventually the angels drove the jinn into this, like now more like a fourth dimensional prison that has some level of intersection with our world, where they can come through into our world at certain locations during certain times, or if they're summoned properly by an act of free will by a human, portals can be opened that will allow the jinn to come through. And of course, they're all like that one meme of that black guy licking his lips and dry washing his hands behind the tree. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're kind of like waiting, especially those red jinn. The blue jinn are because they're free will, jinn have, and same thing with extraterrestrials, because they're also free will beings. It's a free will universe. That's true across the universe, apparently. But because jinn have free will, they run the gamut of hyper evil to beautiful enlightened beings. But the beautiful enlightened beings are basically like, they just want to contemplate the universe and not really interact with humans. So it's exceedingly rare that you'll run into a blue jinn. The green jinn, if you're lucky, right, unless you're phenomenally lucky and get a blue jinn somehow, and they could teach you a lot, actually. But it's usually green jinn, which are the trickster jinn, which are just the very young jinn. And the thing about them is, if jinn can be killed. They're usually in the fourth dimension, but if they manifest their physical form, they can be killed. It's very difficult to kill them, but they can die. They are mortal. And because of that, since jinn apparently can only have one offspring ever, right? Two jinn come together and they make one offspring, and that's it. Jinn are super protective of their children. And so if you mess around with a green jinn or hurt it or make it upset, the parent jinn might come, and then they're going to annihilate you. And so you want to be really, really, really careful with jinn. And then extraterrestrials, in a way, are, I don't want to say worse, but they have the potential to be worse, because extraterrestrials, like if Earth blew up tomorrow, they'd be like, bummer, well, we can move on. They don't really care. They have no skin in the game. And they're all involved in galactic politics. They're all they have their own agendas, right? Which it's, sure, there's good aliens and there's evil aliens, but it's like the odds of interacting with a good alien and knowing that it's good are low. Plus, good aliens might have a very long-term vision of what matters in the galaxy that might be like, oops, a few pawns on Earth got wiped out. Shucks. You know what I mean? Like, they're involved in an epic struggle at the galactic level. And so even good aliens might not have your best interests at heart. Weirdly, demons have a lot more vested interest in humans because they feed on us. They try and trick us into giving up our free will, all this kind of stuff. So demons have a greater vested interest in us. And Moloch is someone unique in that Moloch has this attitude of there's a twofold thing. Total submission to the fear that passeth understanding, the opposite of the peace that passeth understanding that Jesus talked about. The fear that passeth understanding, a fear so intense that you would overcome the most basic biological principle of you would give up your children to be sacrificed to this being. It's the ultimate fear, overriding the very deepest, most important part of, the very thing that makes our species continue, is that we protect our children above all else. And so there's total submission or total annihilation. Moloch does not brook anyone else having any power. Moloch wants to annihilate free will, and Moloch's there to teach us how important free will is, among other things. And I mean, Moloch has a purpose, as evil and vile as it seems, if you consider that we are immortal beings that reincarnate. So even Moloch has a purpose, but my God, that energy is dark and destructive. And the rest of even the qliphothic spirits, which is that tree of death, the very powerful lower astral, they're kind of deities, basically. They're like demon god deities. Those beings, even other than Moloch, they don't agree with Moloch because they gain a lot of their power from worship. Moloch's just this very destructive force. And so I guess at the end of Kali Yuga, when Moloch's on the way out, even the other qliphothic spirits eventually will turn against Moloch. Because when a Kali Yuga ends and Moloch has to give up power, Moloch's not a big fan of giving up power and is a big believer in like burning bridges, salting the earth, and destroying everything. A Molochian, and this speaks to the elites who have been in charge for the past 6,000 years, and why this battle between the Luciferians and Molochians is so complicated, is because the Luciferians who want to take over, they don't want to take over a cinder husk. Lucifer doesn't want to rule over a radioactive wasteland, and try and rebuild civilization from some Mad Max or worse scenario. Lucifer wants to rule a highly technically advanced global civilization.
Well, this is a perfect time for you for us to get into that. Maybe you could break down how these forces translate into the power structure that controls our perception and reality right now and is putting forward all the agendas behind the direction we're headed.
Yeah, so kind of the easiest way to break it down is, I think it's most useful to consider when I say Molochian, Luciferian, or Most High aligned, it's more as a vibration of consciousness. Some people who are Most High aligned, such as myself, actively worship the Most High. Some people who are Luciferian, especially at the tippy top, they worship Lucifer outright, and they know, and they interact with that deity and are guided by that deity. Same thing, of course, with the Molochians. But the vast bulk of people who are aligned with those consciousnesses don't actually interact with those deities. Usually the people at the tippy top, the sort of 10% of humans that create history, do. But everyone else, it's more like it's just the state of consciousness that their soul is at in this incarnation. And so thinking on it deeply and receiving guidance from the angels, I would say that the core trait of Molochians is self-hatred. It's that desire for annihilation. It's that desire for total submission to where Moloch just consumes and subsumes them. And because they have that self-hatred as their core principle, and I mean, it is a principle, they then project that out into the world with destruction. Going back to that shaman that I spoke about earlier, he told me, he didn't use the term Moloch, but he said about 6,000 years ago, the beginning of Kali Yuga, he said there were very powerful black magicians, and they were working with demons of various sorts and fallen angels and whatnot. And one day, the demon said to them, there is a greater power that you have not yet tapped into, but it's far beyond your wildest dreams of evil. And they were like, a greater power? We're black magicians obsessed with power, probably Luciferian in character at that point. And Luciferians like power, just like Molochians do. It's one of those crossovers they have. And they said, okay, well, how do we access it? And they said, you have to do the ritual Epstein-style harm of children plus sacrifice of children. And that opens the portal to the lowest pit of the lower astral, and then Moloch can reach through that and touch the world directly. And that's what happened. And he told me the number one thing on earth that white magicians, light workers, I mean, not the new age nonsense trash, of denying your own shadow. It's all love and light, not that nonsense, but like the more sophisticated, grounded version of that. He said the most important thing for us to do is to wipe out pedophilia above and beyond all else. There is no greater imperative. At the lowest ebb of Molochian consciousness, and what anchors it is pedophilia, and slavery is just barely above that. Wow. The opposite end, and the Most High, protecting the innocent, is the highest imperative of the Most High. And the Luciferians actually find that pedophilia and slavery both to be repugnant, because they're very big believers in free will. Because one of the things that Lucifer realized was, even though his argument was against that humans could be corrupted if they had free will, he came to recognize that his was the ultimate act of free will, rebelling against God. And so Lucifer is actually a big believer in free will. Moloch is not. Moloch believes in total submission and nothing else. So Luciferians at their core principle is narcissism. It's the worship of self. And when you worship the self, you worship Lucifer, like in conjunction. And I'm not talking about getting in touch with your higher self or getting in touch with the Atman, and therefore connecting to the creator, or even beyond that, a non-dual consciousness. I'm talking about worshiping your mental image of self. And so Luciferians are very big into self-improvement and improving society, improving the material condition of society, which is something that is a crossover with the Most High. And is in opposition to Moloch, who would love to have us frozen. The Dark Ages was kind of like, it wasn't the ultimate power point of Moloch. That would have been actually at the time of King Solomon. But the Dark Ages in a lot of ways are a great exemplar of Molochian. Dark Ages in Europe are a great exemplar of what Moloch would like. He'd like everyone throwing shits out in the street and people being dull, brainless peasants, warfare everywhere you turn, disease running rampant, just rape, genocide, slavery, nightmare, right? And Moloch would have been fine with that. The thing is, one of the things that, and real quick, just the Most High, and then I want to go back to that point. The Most High, the core trait is self-love. Not self-worship, and not the worship of a mental construct of self, but to love yourself so deeply that you then follow the commandment of Yeshua, the most important, the essence of what Yeshua came to teach us, Jesus, and that is love thy neighbor as thyself, which that means not like you have a neighbor who's kind of an asshole, but I'll get over it and build him an apple pie or bake him an apple pie, but he's kind of a jerk. No, to recognize that everything is God. Everything is a manifestation of God. You're a manifestation of God. I'm a manifestation of God. And I should love you as myself, recognizing that you are just another aspect or facet of this creator. And if you understand that at the deepest level, then things will automatically flow from that. Just like if you're a narcissist, you can have self-enlightened interest, right? Or enlightened self-interest, enlightened self-interest, to where you do things for yourself, but it benefits society, right? Lucifer is very libertarian and very believes in competition and excellence, whereas Moloch believes in despotism and monopoly and top-down control. Whereas the Luciferians believe in excellence and meritocracy, right? The Molochians believe very much in highly controlled nepotism, right? Loyalty is what matters to them above all else. Loyalty to this energy and following orders with unquestioning. Whereas Lucifer likes to reward people who are daring and intelligent and are the best our species has to offer. And that has an uplifting quality. It's hyper intelligent. Molochianism is very dull. It's might makes right. Luciferianism believes in honoring contracts and the rule of law, right? Because it doesn't entirely trust other people, because everyone's competitive. And of course, Lucifer's like, go ahead and lie, go ahead and cheat. And if you get caught, well, then deal with that. But if you want to cheat, go right ahead. Any way you can outcompete the other is good. So for people who are Molochian, another core principle, or not core principle, but very important trait of the Luciferians is Luciferian confusion. Molochians mistake Luciferians for Molochians. Most high people mistake Luciferians for Molochians. And they use that cloak to deceive both good people and also to deceive especially the Molochians, because for the past 6,000 years, Moloch has ruled with an iron fist. And since the Luciferians want power, that's one thing that they have in common with the Molochians. They want power. They want to be the best. They want to run things, and they think they can do it the best because they're so intelligent. They don't have wisdom, but they're hyper intelligent. It's the most intelligent of the three, but they lack wisdom, right? And so they have, in order to be near the levers of power the past 6,000 years, they had no choice but to work hand in glove with the Molochians. So all the sophisticated things that the Molochians seem to do, it's not them, it's the Luciferians. The Luciferians are that consigliere to the Mafia Don who executes everything and is very smart, but the Mafia Don can have him killed at any time because he rules with an iron fist.
Well, let's explore some of the agendas that are rolling out right now, and maybe you could tell us if you believe that what we're experiencing is Molochian or Luciferian, or maybe even a mix of both. There seems to be some crossover here, especially when you look at the transhuman agenda. There seems to be a lot of the technological power aspects crossed over with the harming of children. So these things can be a little convoluted, it seems, at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's a really interesting one, because Lucifer's fine with transhumanism in the sense of like augmenting yourself and cyberpunk kind of stuff. Lucifer does not like the harm of children, finds it odious, finds the genital mutilation to be odious. And in fact, most of the really sophisticated arguments and narratives that are being laid down that will eventually destroy the Molochians are highlighting things like the gender mutilation and the pedophilia. You notice how pedophilia just doesn't go away? It just doesn't go away no matter how hard they try. It keeps popping back up, because what I've been told is that the three Achilles heel of the Molochians are the banking system, pedophilia, and this recent attempt to kill everyone, right? Now, two of those three, the killing of everyone attempt and the banking system, have both been involved the Luciferians to some degree as administrators and as planners. But pedophilia is just a pure Molochian thing. And so I believe that when Kali Yuga ends in 2025, between 2025 and say 2028, 2029, the Luciferians will be hunting down and wiping out the Molochians, and they will do it based on pointing out the banking system and usury, and they'll pretend that it's not them, because most of the families who dominate it, the people who run the show and gain all the wealth, are Molochian in character. Even if the people telling them how to do it are Luciferian, they're going to obfuscate that part of things. Same thing with the recent trying to kill us all with the pokey, right? With the arm pokey.
Yeah.
And the thing is that was designed by the Luciferians, but they wanted it to be a more pure eugenics, where the best of humanity would survive and would seed the new Luciferian age. But the Molochians were like, kill all who resist, kill them all. And so there was a fight behind the scenes, and it's coming out that stuff about the saline was true. At least in Denmark, we have absolute concrete evidence that something like 25% or 30% of the pokies that were administered were saline. And that is that Luciferian impulse, and the spirit of Lucifer guided those in certain areas. So just because you got one doesn't necessarily mean that you got the baddie. And they sold this to the Molochians based on saying, hey, let's have different batches that do different things, and we can track it on the back end because we can see the batch number and who got administered what, and then we have a control group. And then that way you can test your terrible transhumanist nonsense, right? So the Luciferians always are tricking and duping the Molochians because they're playing the proverbial 4 or 5D chess, and the Molochians are like, Hulk smash, and they just knock over the checkered board because it's too complicated for them. So they don't see that how they're getting set up to have the rug pulled on them based on what's going to happen is when the Luciferians turn the corner, they're going to kill some of them that are the most dangerous, but they're going to bring a bunch of them to some kind of Nuremberg 2.0 type tribunal where they're going to expose the pedophilia. They're going to carefully expose aspects of the pokey and not what they did and put it all on the Molochians. And same thing with banking. And people are going to be like, hell yeah, fuck those people, kill them all. And they'll have a little kangaroo court with a foregone conclusion that will help legitimize their reign as they take over. And so, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, do you think everyone that we see, when it comes to what we're allowed to take in, what we're allowed to ingest from the media, from the television, everyone that is allowed to be in a position of power is going to be part of either one of those two camps, whether they're politics, whether they're religious leaders, whether they're corporate leaders, business leaders, that they are part of either one of those two camps?
As a general rule, I would say the vast overwhelming majority, yes. There are rare exceptions like the King of Jordan. The King of Jordan seems to be a most high aligned ruler. He's managed to keep that country peaceful in the midst of wars being all around him. He's always very accepting of Jews, Muslims, Christians. He protects them all. He brings in like Christian groups who are getting slaughtered by, ISIS, ISIL, CIA run bullshit. He welcomed in Christians who were getting killed. He's just seems to be a very good man. Perhaps the royalty of Bhutan, some of them are also most high aligned. Bhutan being one of the most peaceful countries on earth, right? It's there in the Himalayas. So once in a while you see people who are most high aligned, but it's exceedingly rare, because the Molochians instantly recognize the most high energy and they want to destroy it because it has an innocence to it. And one of their main principles is destroy innocence wherever you find it. And so they'll literally crucify you, right? Yeshua, right? They will smash it. The minute they sense anything that seems to have any significant amount of most high signature to it, they go out of their way to wipe it out. Or anything that vibrates at the upper end of Luciferianism, which is the lower end of most high, they'll wipe it out, like the Cathars getting wiped out during the Albigensian Crusade, which I would argue that the Cathars and the Enlightenment and the Renaissance are all that Luciferian impulse coming up as we're moving closer and closer to the Luciferian ages of the Bronze and Silver Age yugas of Dwarpa and Treta Yuga, respectively. And so this impulse is rising more and more in humanity as we've been on this ascending Kali Yuga since around the time of King Solomon. There's been more and more of this Luciferian impulse, which does include that most high energy. And so the Molochians don't like it, and they stamp it out. The Renaissance comes along. Cosimo Medici dies like 2 years after the Hermetic is put out. I haven't been able to track this down, but I strongly suspect Cosimo Medici, I'm certain he was Luciferian, but I strongly suspect he was murdered by the Venetians. I probably poisoned in some kind of way. And the Renaissance was smashed by the church. And then, a couple hundred years later, the Enlightenment comes along, and then that gets smashed and kind of largely discredited. And then you have the Scottish Enlightenment, and then that moved over to the U.S. and became the founding of the United States, which were a Luciferian country in character. The founding fathers were Luciferian in character. And the Bill of Rights in particular is one of the most blatantly Luciferian documents that's ever been written. Now, of course, some of the founding fathers were Molochian, right? They owned slaves. It wasn't like it was this pure, pristine Luciferian that's just, doesn't really happen in the Kali Yuga. Usually it's tainted to some degree by that Molochian influence. But so, gosh, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no.
Well,
what would you think is the the desired outcome for the Luciferians of where they want humanity to go, the direction that they want to go. We know that transhumanism is a part of this, but how far does that go? Do they want a full merger of man and machine? I've heard plenty of experts and researchers on that are talking about they're trying to do a forced evolution of humanity through technology, and possibly part of that is becoming this one androgynous being that they believe we once were. Is that a part of this at all?
So, I mean, again, it's sometimes quite difficult to disentangle the Molochian and Luciferian, and the Luciferians are busy doing Muhammad Ali style rope-a-dope, where they keep letting the Molochians feel like they're winning, while actually it's setting up the Molochians to take a fall. And they don't see it because they're just not that sophisticated. And as long as you have a thin veneer of the Molochians are in control, they don't really look deeper. They don't really look deeper at could it potentially lead to our fall. They're quite arrogant after 6,000 years in control, and they're also just quite dull in character. So the transhumanist thing, again, if it's free will, Lucifer supports it. If it's technology, he loves it. So a merger between the two, yes. Sexless, no. Sexless, no. That's Molochian bullshit. The gender mutilation of kids, that's Molochian, 100%. An interface between man and machine, Lucifer would be fine with that if it makes humans more excellent. But he wouldn't want us to become too far in that direction, because as you become more machine, you become less spiritual. And Lucifer is a spiritualizing force. So it seems that what the Luciferians want is, and again, I should just take a moment to say, look, all this stuff is based on my own research and gnosis, and listeners, take what resonates and throw the rest in the trash. Hopefully it gives you some useful pointers or some useful information that resonates with you, and you can go in your own direction with it. I'm not trying to tell you this is like I'm the final arbiter of truth or something. I'm fallible. I make mistakes just like everyone else. And so this is just what my perception of things are based on gnosis and decades of research. So it seems that the Luciferians want a global technological technocracy where they use a very light touch of total control. What do I mean by that? For example, digital ID. The Molochian version is the social credit score Black Mirror. The Luciferian version is everything is tracked and we just keep tabs because we want to make sure nobody creeps up on us. We need to especially watch out for the Molochians to make sure that they never come back, because they're our great enemy for now, right? Being close to the Kali Yuga cusp. And so they want to track everything, and they want light control. They want to be in charge. They love power. They also want things like surveillance. That ain't going away. It's going to increase. It's going to increase to the absolute maximum. But again, you're letting people operate with free will, but you're using that surveillance and so forth to gain an edge and to have the Luciferian royalty who will run things, that they'll be able to control things, because they do want to have control, but they want a light touch. They believe in a more sophisticated version of control. The Molochians are dumb as fuck, and they're like, you'll eat the bugs and live in the pods, right? And with the brain chip, cradle to grave, total control. And so that's the Molochian vision, the Great Reset. And the Luciferians are letting elements of that be put into place because those are elements they want. Things like new digital currency, digital ID, right? And total surveillance and technocracy and high tech, right? And high tech connected to all aspects of what we do, because one of Lucifer's major goals is to make us a big-time spacefaring civilization. At some point, and I don't know when, but at some point, Lucifer got off our planet, probably in a previous time when we had some kind of spacefaring. So the Luciferian consciousness and that deity is beyond just Earth. Unlike the other two, Moloch and the Most High, which are bound to the Earth and are actually much more powerful than Lucifer on Earth, especially during their eras, because they're these opposite principles of creation and destruction. Lucifer at some point somehow, some way got off the earth and is an interplanetary deity. But I guess humans apparently are particularly powerful spiritually and psychically and magically. We're on the short list of the most elite in the galaxy. We're very weak in other ways. We're not the smartest. We're not the strongest. We don't live the longest. We're not the most creative. But we have almost unparalleled spiritual potency, apparently. And so Lucifer really wants humans to get into the bigger game. And the bigger game for him is he wants to create a galactic Luciferian empire. He has very grand ideas. And so they want space travel and it being brought out into the open. Luciferians control all the, what I call ultra tech, anti-grav, right? Free energy, quantum computing, blockchain, right? Genetic engineering, all that kind of stuff. All the people who do that are Luciferian in consciousness and are guided by that spirit, whether they know it or not. And some of them know it.
And is this what we're seeing with the quote-unquote government disclosure and talk of UFOs and aliens in the media, slow drip into the consciousness? Is this what's going on, trying to feed us that possibly Luciferians already have this relationship with extraterrestrials of some sort?
Yeah, so again, Luciferians and Molochians working hand in glove a huge amount of the time. And it's only recently that the Luciferians, probably since around 2001 or so, that the Luciferians have really, 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 really started to break away. I mean, you could argue since the founding of the United States, really. But it's really been since the founding of the United States, and it's ramped up, the Luciferians are more and more breaking away from the Molochians. And that's the whole breakaway civilizations you hear about sometimes with the secret space programs, right? And I'm not talking about the Cory Good bullshit psyops for retarded people about blue chickens. So sorry to anyone who believes that, but like, goddamn, get out of here with that. So I didn't mean to insult anyone who finds that interesting or whatever.
We know what's up with that here, definitely.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Ironic. But so there was this book that came out decades ago in the 70s, I believe, early 70s, called The Report from Iron Mountain. And in it posited that there were 3 ways to create a global government. And stop me if any of these sound familiar. A pandemic, a global climate catastrophe, or a faked alien invasion. You may have noticed in the past 3 years, all of those are getting really ramped up. And the reason they're getting ramped up is because the old banking system is on its last legs. The debt-based banking system cannot continue as it currently is, and there has to be a reset of the financial system, no matter what, just mathematically. There's too much debt. There's too much debt backed by air. And it's going to collapse. It's inevitable. It's just a matter of time. And so what they're trying to do is a controlled demolition and a switch over to a new financial system that's been long in the planning, right? And that's what the Molochian version is the digital ID with a blockchain that tracks everything you do, social credit score, and eventually like you have to have a chip in your brain, and then they'd have total control. But they would slide you in that direction by total control over the financial system. So that is on deck and is happening. Interestingly enough, by January 1st, 2025, they're going to turn on what some people call the quantum financial system, which is better put, a blockchain-based financial system. This is where XRP, XLM, and central bank digital currencies come in. Now, CDBCs are Molochian, but XRP, XLM, XDC, notice they all have X in it, just like the Lucifer sigil has an X in it, just like Elon Luciferian Musk literally today changed Twitter to X, and today is the feast day for Hathor, who is the Egyptian goddess of Venus, and Venus is the female aspect of Lucifer. So it's no mistake that he just happened to do it today.
So they literally just changed Twitter to X?
Today, yes.
Just an X?
Well, like they replaced the bird logo with an X, and eventually I believe it will all, if you go onto Twitter, it will reroute you to x.com. And Musk wants to make X.com the Alibaba of first the US and then the whole planet. Alibaba is the Chinese everything app, right? It's like Amazon, Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, banking, Apple Pay, all in one, right? And Musk wants to build that for the US. So the alien bit is the third one, right? The Molochians wanted to take over with the pandemic, right? And didn't quite work. Didn't quite work because Luciferians wanted elements of it, but stopped other elements of it from happening. They want to take over with the climate bullshit, right? I'm an old school environmentalist. I believe in protecting species, protecting the environment, cleaning up pollution like microplastics or other chemicals that are in the oceans, the air, the riverways, the land, right? But you notice you never hear about that anymore. When I was a kid, it was all about save the whales, save the rainforest, save the bald eagles. And suddenly in the 1990s, it became CO2, 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 CO2. Nothing matters but CO2. Don't talk about anything but CO2. If you talk about the rainforest, it's only so you can talk about carbon offsets, right? So that's that Molochian energy, and they're trying to do a takeover with climate catastrophe and climate lockdowns and blah blah blah. The thing that they're considering doing, because they're getting desperate, because they're starting to realize something's wrong, but they can't quite figure it out because they're dumb. They can't quite figure it out, but like the administrators among the Molochians are recognizing something's very, very, very wrong, and they don't understand what it is. They probably interpret it as internecine struggle between the Molochian factions, which actually does exist. For example, the CCP and Davos they're trying to publicly mend fences, but behind the scenes, there's been some kind of significant fracture between those two groups, which are both very Molochian in character, the CCP and Davos. But there's a fracture between them, and you can see it if you look deep. You look at things that George Soros says. You look at the weather weapons attacks that have been happening between the U.S. and China. You look at the BRICS gold-based currency, which is coming out next month, right, which challenges the petrodollar. There is a split in the Molochian faction, which is rare. Usually they're very unified. But the Molochian consciousness is starting to splinter, and that comes up with, among other things, splintering between the groups. And so the Molochians recognize something's very wrong, and they're not quite certain what it is, and they're starting to get desperate. And how you can know is, if they were in total control, we'd still be in frog boiling mode. Supposedly, Agenda 2030 was originally Agenda 2050, but they moved it sooner and sooner and sooner because something panicked them. It might be the Project Looking Glass thing, where they looked into the future and then they eventually found a bottleneck event that no matter what they did, they always failed. They're in panic mode. And you can tell because the propaganda has been dialed up to like 13 out of 10.
Yeah.
Right? Like the propaganda is off the chain and it's clumsy. Have you noticed the propaganda is getting clumsier and clumsier? The sats are getting worse and worse. It's because Molochians are in charge of these things now. In the past, Luciferians did it for them. Look at how sophisticated 9/11 was.
Right. Oh, even more
Incredibly
JFK.
Sophisticated.
I mean, we're still putting the pieces of the JFK assassination together. They had some sophisticated spy craft and techniques during that whole operation, and like you said, 9/11. But there is a noticeably sloppier difference in the way they're executing these operations these days, for sure.
And it's interesting you mentioned JFK, because I believe JFK was not saying he was like an open worshiper of Lucifer, but I believe he was Luciferian, and I believe that the Luciferians allowed him to be martyred, and that's why they have the eternal torch where he is, Lucifer, the light bearer. They let it happen because they kind of had no choice, and they decided to make him into a martyr, and I believe JFK will come up in a big, big way here in the not too distant future. Look, notice RFK has come out, right? Notice Trump and RFK both talk about the JFK assassination a lot, right? Notice Trump was good friends with JFK Jr. I don't know if I believe he's still alive. It's possible. But, if he's not alive and his death wasn't faked, he was certainly killed, right? And he was killed because he was going to expose, how the JFK assassination went down.
Mm.
But so, gosh, we had a thread there and we're kind of jumping over the place. I wanted to tie off some thought that was in there just to explain something. Oh, yeah, the fake alien invasion.
Mm-hmm.
So the Molochians are getting desperate and they're getting ready to pull the final card as Werner von Braun, who was almost certainly Luciferian, right? That's the Nazi rocket scientist who brought over. He told his secretary, Dr. Carol Rosen, that they would use all these different things to weaponize space, and that eventually they would do a fake alien invasion to weaponize space, and that's the final card, right? It is the final card. There's no going back when they do that one. They kind of already entered the no going back territory with this pandemic, right? They're already kind of a no going back, but the fake alien invasion, there's no going back from that. They can't, because they have to reveal extraterrestrials at that point, which is like a huge paradigm shift and will blow open a bunch of their 6,000 year control networks based on a lot of them are like that we're alone in the universe. We're control, there's no other life, the mind control aspects of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which were all hijacked. They all have things to offer, but they've all been hijacked at various different points by this Molochian energy. A lot of the control apparatuses on Earth are based on that we're stuck on this little orb and there's no life out there in the universe. So the minute that they pull that trigger, and they're kind of already have, like it's blowing open that we're not alone, and that has huge implications that messes with their control, right? As does things like free energy would mess with their control in a big way. So I'm of the opinion that one of three events would be the trigger that would create outright open war to where the Luciferians would make their move, their no going back move. And that is if the internet goes down globally for any significant period of time, because that creates a fog of war. And by the way, these aren't mutually exclusive. They may all happen more or less simultaneously. So fog of war created by the internet going down. When the CIA does a coup d'etat, the first thing they do is they take over the media in a country. They put their agents and paramilitary guys, and they take over all the radio, all the television stations, and they cut it. Then they kill the people they need to kill. They arrest the people they need to arrest. They bring back up the media and they go, hey, guess what? The good guys won. It's a brave new rulership. The good guys won. But they have to control that narrative. But first, there can't be any communication. Regular people can't know what's going on. And then they do all their cloak and dagger and stab each other in the darkness. And then they emerge and go, oh, guess what? The good guys won. Isn't it amazing how every time a coup happens, the good guys always win? Right? So if the internet goes down, the Luciferians will take advantage of that to wipe out the Molochians. When they turn on the new financial system, right? The Molochians think, oh, we'll have CDBCs in total control, but the bridge currency is XRP and or XLM. And what will happen is capitalism abhors fetters. The first business person to realize that they can do direct peer-to-peer or via the XRP ledger interchanges without that friction of changing to the two different CDBCs, they're going to find that to be more efficient. They'll gain a little bit of an edge, and that'll compound with compounding interest type of stuff. So I believe that CDBCs will roll out and they will fail almost immediately because of popular uprising against it, which the Luciferians will boost and amplify, and because there's a better system that's already in place that's very sophisticated that has the X right there in the middle. And there's an X right in the middle of the sigil for Lucifer, if you look that up.
Interesting. That is so interesting, man. Well, hey, we've got a few minutes left. Let's spend it on this. Do you think that we will ever see an age of the Most High, and how long of an age of Luciferianism should we expect?
Yeah, so I just want to tie up that last thought, and then I'll answer that. So
sure.
if they do the fake dealing invasion, that would mean that the Luciferians are able to put their assets, right? So they'll do the Project Bluebeam in order to have a huge illusion of hundreds of ships, a giant mothership, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll have 10 or 15 real ships come down and go zap, zap, zap and blow up buildings and stuff. That's what the Molochians want to do. What the Luciferians will actually do is they'll use that ultra tech to go to like different chateaus and so forth and go zap, 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 zap a Rothschild chateau, arrest Rothschilds, arrest whatever other Molochians, right? And they'll use that high tech, which has been allowed to be put into place. The thing is, they have to turn the corner once they reveal themselves fully. They have to turn the corner almost instantly, or the Molochians will burn the house down around themselves. They'll never give up control. They would rather just blow everything up than give up control. So any one of those three events, and again, they may happen semi-simultaneously, would give the Luciferians the opening they need to run the table on the Molochians, because they have to do it almost instantly. Breaking down the financial system would allow them to have that ultimate control point, which the Molochians have controlled for 6,000 years. So how long does it last? About 6,000 years per age, with there's 300-year crossover periods between the different yugas. So there would be a 300-year crossover period starting in 2025. I'm going to have an Indian scholar named Bibhu Dev Misra on my show here in August, who's just written a book on the yugas. And that's where I originally found that the Kali Yuga ends in 2025. He goes through every possible iteration of the yugas. It's on Graham Hancock's website. You can type in the yugas or Kali Yuga, and Graham Hancock's website should come right up. Bibhu, Bibhu Dev Misra, Misra. He's going to come on my show. We're going to have a deep dive on this. But I had been looking for a decade to find, since I first became aware of the yugas and became a Vedic astrologer back in 2007, I've been looking for a decade of something that kicked off my claircognizance, my knowing of when the yugas began and ended. And everything I found, like even with all due respect to Sri Yukteswar and Rudolf Steiner, for what it's worth, and people don't have to believe this if they don't want to, the angels have told me they were given misinformation about when the yugas end because it was important to the spiritual development of humanity at that time to believe that the Kali Yuga was over, that it was very important to give them hope. But look at the 20th century. Does that look like we're in a better yuga? My God, genocide, the two world wars, Vietnam, like horrors of it. Sure, there's elements of Luciferianism, right? Like a super advancement in technology, but there was still an awful lot of Molochian action in there, and you still had the debt-based usury system, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas 2025, which just so happens to be when they turn on this system, it just so happens to be the end of Q1, 2025 is when the World Bank's funding for the COVID-19 ends, right? There's several different things that point towards 2025. There's certain astrological things that point towards it. But when I found this back in 2018, before he had written it in 2012, when I found it in 2019, before the pandemic hit, I was like, yes, this is it. Wow. Right. And he was debunking at the time that 2012 was the end of an age. That was part of the reason he wrote it in 2012. And he had all this incredible research about it. And so each yuga lasts about 2,700 years, with the 300-year crossover between phase shift yugas. Like when you move between the Iron Ages of Kali Yuga and into the Bronze Age, there's a phase shift. And so there's like a 300-year crossover period. That said, the minute Kali Yuga ends, which it seems is March 21st, 2025, things are going to unravel on a massive level for the Molochians, like very, very quickly. And between 2025 and 2028, this is what the virtues have told me. And we'll see. It's not that far. I'll either look like absolutely brilliant or like a dumbass, this time in, 2027. If I'm wrong, I think we'll have bigger fish to fry, because that would mean that, the people who believe in a unified elite that are just total lockstep, which I do not believe in at all, or else we would already be chipped and in a pod and eating bugs. Mm-hmm. Like we would have no wealth. They would have taken everything from us overnight because you have unified elites. What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't believe in that at all. Propaganda, all the rest I said. So between 2025 and 2028, the Luciferians will be hunting down and trying the Molochians who are safe enough to do it. The most dangerous Molochians will be instantly killed. No trial, straight to execution. But they have to have a big show trial and see, look how good we are. We stopped the pedophiles, which, by the way, kick some ass, Luciferians. Hang all those Molochians by the neck, right? Like, kill those pedophiles. I'm way on board with that. But they have to create a narrative of why they should rule, why they're the rightful rulers, and why they're the white knights who came from off stage and saved everyone while obfuscating their negative things. The Luciferians have this Luciferian confusion. I want to give an example of that for folks before we end here. And that is, if you ask truthers, right, not Biden voters who are Muppet morons, right, but if you ask truthers, hey, what do you think about Klaus Schwab? 100 out of 100 will say, that guy is an evil motherfucker. Nobody will defend that guy. Bill Gates, same thing. Augustin Carson's head of the BIS, same thing. Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, same thing. Emmanuel Macron, same thing. People, Biden, everyone will say that evil, horrible. But then you ask people, what about Donald Trump? What about Elon Musk? And people suddenly have all kinds of different answers about it. It's the Luciferian confusion. It's one of the ways you can tell you're dealing with a Luciferian. They also tend to have a very sophisticated, cerebral, and genteel quality to them. Whereas the Molochians feel like monsters stuffed into a suit, or a shitty Cosby sweater if it's Bill Gates, right? And so the Luciferians they're not good, right? Because it's a false light. It's a false light based on the ego. But compared to the pitch blackness of Molochianism, it's an improvement. And we'll see a tremendous improvement in society. Imagine Renaissance Florence with anti-grav and free energy and a quantum computing internet, right? That's the Luciferian era.
We are too far off for an age of the Most High for us to ever experience it. That's 6,000 years away. But are there groups now that are even starting to prepare for this age?
Oh, brother, man, you didn't know it, but you just lobbed a softball right across the plate for me, because one of the things that the angels have asked me to do, and we'll see, like, I thought I had something that was going to lead to this immediately, but it's been delayed. But the angels have asked me to create what are called Golden Age enclaves around the planet. So one of the big differences between Luciferians and Molochians is that Molochians have a maybe not karmic right, but they have a natural law right during the Kali Yugas, right? Remember, we're all immortal souls that reincarnate over and over and over again in this frame of I'm offering of an explanation world, which you can throw in the trash if you don't agree with it, the listener. But I personally believe and know, for me, it's a knowing, we're immortal souls and we incarnate over and over and over again. So probably everybody listening to this will see the next golden age. Probably a lot of them saw the last golden age of Atlantis, and some amount of them even saw the previous ones of Lemuria and Hyperborea and so forth. So yes, we'll see the golden age, but we won't see it now. But Molochians have a natural law right during the Kali Yuga they can just genocide on and wipe out Luciferians, fellow Molochians, and Most High people. Look at all the genocide, right? Luciferians have a right to wipe out the Molochians, but Luciferians do not have a right and will not wipe out the Most High faction. They'll try and corrupt. They'll try and trick. They'll try and outcompete. They'll use economics. They'll use surveillance. They'll use any dirty tricks they can to make the Most High faction stumble. But they have a weird sort of reverence for us, because Lucifer's whole argument with God was humans are corruptible. Not, I want to enslave humans and destroy them. He wanted to prove a point that humans are corruptible. And he's really fixated on that. And so he will try and corrupt, but he won't destroy. And so properly created groups can live for all intents and purposes within these Golden Age enclaves as though it was the Golden Age. And that will create the seed germ for the Golden Age that will eventually then spread out of those and create the golden age 6,000 years from now. When the angels told me this, I was like, that is a tall order. And they said, you will meet the right people. And it's not me alone. I'm not even going to be like the head of it or whatever, but just that's part of my life purpose, is to work with others who have that vision, who want to create these golden age enclaves, is the term that the angels used. And so I haven't talked about this a lot openly, but that was clearly brought about by the Most High for me to say that right there, for you to ask that question, and you didn't know.
Right on.
I haven't told you that.
I love the synchronicities, man. Well, Ian, this was fantastic. We barely scratched the surface on some of this stuff. It's been an hour and a half. We're going to have to do this again, go a little deeper next time.
I love it.
Before you head out, though, let the audience know where they can find all of your content, everything you're working with.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, I do a lot of things. I wear a lot of hats. And I'm going to have this opportunity to work with a corporation that does great work, is going to do great work all over the planet as like a spiritual advisor and astrologer. But some of the funding has been delayed about that. Some of the things have been delayed. And so the good news on that was I was shutting down my doing Vedic astrology for people. And so for people who are interested in learning about their karma and soul's destiny, and how to also harness the best aspects and mitigate the negative aspects of their chart, I do Vedic astrology readings. So I do natal charts, and that's especially useful for people who are under 40. Once you turn 40 and beyond, the degree to which you integrate the lessons of your natal chart of your first 40 years determines how much you move into your Navamsa, or second half of life chart. And so it's still useful to look at the natal. And I recommend, for the people who are interested, to do both natal and Navamsa, because the natal continues to carry over to some degree in your 40s. But at some point in your 40s or 50s, assuming that you're not in total denial of what happened to you in your first 40 years and you haven't integrated it all, you move somewhere between like 85 to 90% ish into your Navamsa chart. And so for people, some people like me have a utter garbage natal chart that's hot dog water, as my son would say, and then have a very powerful Navamsa. Another example is J.K. Rowling. She was like literally going behind Sainsbury's and getting food before it was put in the dumpster, and on the government dole in her late 30s, wrote Harry Potter. And by the time she was my age, she was a billionaire. That's somewhat rare, but you also have the opposite, right? Like child stars or athletes who have amazing natal charts, and then their Navamsa is really weak. And then for a lot of people, it's just, there's a similar level of power, but there's a difference in focus on life. I also do spiritual guidance for people who are just looking for guidance. I can talk to the angels. I can work with your higher self and help bring you guidance in whatever way you need. I especially like to help and work with people around healing trauma. I really think healing trauma is the single most important thing you can do to become a more effective person in the world, and to just completely change your relationship with reality. As someone who had CPTSD and has largely but not completely healed that, it's been life-changing for me to heal trauma, and I have a lot of spiritual tools on how to do that. And finally, I do teach people periodically angelic magic, and I will be opening up an angelic magic class in September. Right now, I'm just teaching the basic sort of angelic magic 101, and then for very talented students, I'm eventually going to offer archangelic, and at some point, one of the things the angels want me to do is to teach how to access the higher spheres, but that's very sacred, and I keep it very close to the chest. So, whitelotusoflight.com and White Lotus of Light on YouTube. If you're interested in seeing my content where I go into all this crazy woo-woo shit and super, super deep. If you like hearing me talk endlessly, well, you can find it on that channel.
Excellent.
Even when I should be letting guests talk a bit more.
Well, Ian, thank you. This was fascinating, and we'll definitely do it again. We'll schedule something for the future. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will be talking again tomorrow as usual. We'll see y'all then.